When you ask the Democratic primary electorate what their top issues are, climate change is right up there at the top of the list. Multiple of the candidates at the last two nights of debates listed it as the biggest threat facing America today. And so obviously there had to be a lot of talk about it at a presidential debate. I mean, that is the person with the most single power to do something about it. Unfortunately, not really. And joining us now to talk about climate change and the debates, Varshini Prakash, co-founder and executive director of Sunrise Movement. Welcome back to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Always glad to have you on. So first of all, overall, the amount of questions about climate change at these two nights of debates, the substance with which they went into the topic, did it meet your expectations?
I wouldn't say that it did. You know, it was a mixed bag for us the last couple of nights. We, as young people and as climate advocates, are pretty used to this issue being completely sidelined in our presidential election. I think in 2016, it was less than 2% of total time during the election cycle was devoted to climate change, and not a single question was asked about it during the general election cycle. So comparatively, we saw a cumulative maybe 20 minutes or less probably on both Wednesday and Thursday nights devoted to the climate crisis. The first night, honestly, the questions were pretty abysmal. It was slightly better last night, in large part due to candidates like Kamala Harris talking about her support for a Green New Deal, saying that we need to talk about this as a crisis, not just as climate change, but a climate crisis. Bernie Sanders bringing up the role of the fossil fuel industry and the corporate capture of our government that has stymied progress on this issue for decades.
And I know that there had been a big conversation over the past few weeks about having a debate focused entirely on climate. And honestly, after watching these debates, I'm not sure who I would trust to do that, because it wasn't just that there weren't a lot of questions about climate change. Like, I noticed, like, when Chuck Todd was asking the questions, it came off to me as a sort of begrudging thing. Like, he barely wanted to talk about it. There was no passion there. And although I've read that something like 15 minutes of the two nights of debate were about climate change, as a person who that is my core issue, it didn't feel like it at times.
Absolutely, and I think, you know, what I noticed was that there is a significant lack of climate literacy amongst the media and political establishment right now. Every single one of the issues that was discussed, whether it was immigration, whether it was the economy, whether it was racial justice and increased mass incarceration, all of those issues are deeply, inextricably intertwined with the climate crisis. And so for folks to sort of relegate it to the realm of environmentalism and talk about it about an hour and a half in every night, long after many of the young people that I was watching these debates with had curfews and had to go to bed, was deeply disappointing. And I think there's a lot of work to be done.
So did any of the responses, did any of the candidates stand out on this issue for you?
Yeah, I think in particular last night, I was blown away by Kamala Harris's performance just broadly across the board. Obviously, there was that remarkable moment between her and Joe Biden where she called him out for his racist history. And I think also the moment when Pete Buttigieg answered questions about farmers and the way in which the climate crisis is affecting the Midwest right here in this country, and how farmers have to be a part of the solution. And Bernie Sanders as well really stood out. I would say on Wednesday night, you know, Elizabeth Warren just minutes out was connecting the climate crisis to the broader issue of building economic power as Americans, and also investing big in green technology, was calling out the role of the fossil fuel industry in corrupting our government as well. And I thought we saw Jay Inslee, Beto O'Rourke to a certain degree, and also Julian Castro really come out shining as well.
Yeah, I did. I found it interesting. I was watching Jay Inslee, you know, to see how strongly is he going to push on this sort of core issue in his candidacy. And it was interesting that when asked at the end to list the biggest threat to America, he didn't say climate change, others did.
Yeah, it was interesting too. I was kind of surprised by that. I think we would have also liked to see from these candidates a little bit more. Almost all of them support the Green New Deal, and Kamala Harris was one of the folks that actually came out and said it. And I was hoping to see from many of these other candidates like Bernie Sanders, Jay Inslee, Elizabeth Warren, some explicit support for the Green New Deal, considering that it really aligns with so much of the economic vision that many of them are putting forward as well.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.